Hello, today I have another dress review, and the brand that I'm going to be reviewing today is Son de Flor. For full transparency, I was gifted this item, but I 100% promise that I would never accept any item that I don't agree with the brand's sustainability and ethics values, and that I didn't think I could give a decent review. I have absolutely turned down a couple brands for these reasons before because they could not provide me with anything regarding their sustainability and ethics. So even though this dress is gifted, this will be a 100% honest review, and you can be assured that I would not lie because I got something for free. Son de Flor does make a wide variety of garments, but they're most well known for their dresses. And this dress that I received is the Carmen dress in terracotta and retails for about 198 euros, which is around 200 USD. Their dresses generally run from about $150 to $250, whatever that is in euros. So for a little background information about Son de Flor is a slow fashion brand based in Lithuania. They sell primarily linen garments, but they do also sell some cotton, hemp, and wool garments. Their wool, however, is a 20% polyester blend, so I will probably be sticking with their other lines. However, they do avoid plastic in all of their packaging. They have a very thorough section on their website detailing their production practices and every process from growing the linen to weaving the fabric to producing the garments is all done within the EU and follows EU working conditions and salaries. Their linen is all OEKO-Tex 100 certified, and I actually took the time to research exactly what that includes. So basically what that means is that their linen cannot include anything like azo dyes, formaldehydes, nickels, among a lot of other things. And all of those things are already banned in the EU. However, it's really important for the US because none of those things are banned or even regulated in the US. I started down a big rabbit hole of research while looking into this, so if you guys would like a video about how fast fashion is killing you, not just via climate change, then let me know and I will start working on that. But back to the actual topic of this video, Son de Flor is doing a great job regarding all of these issues. They very clearly care about the health of the planet and of their consumers, as well as making sure their employees at every level of production is well paid with good working conditions. And finally, something that I thought personally was very sweet, on their production page, they've listed their makers' names, photos, and short bios above the founders of the company, which just really shows how highly they value those workers. They also have a program called Son de Flor Pre-Loved, where they will take back any garment that you have outgrown or decide you don't want anymore, and they will pay the shipping back to them, as well as give you a 50 euro gift certificate to use on their website. Then they make those available for people to buy at a discounted price. This is a super good way to reduce waste and extend the life of a garment. Son de Flor also has a really great blog post detailing why linen garments tend to be more expensive than similar garments made with different fabrics. The list is kind of long, but the reasons that really stuck out to me were, one, that linen has a very kind of narrow scope of where it can be grown. It needs a cooler climate to grow than other natural fibers to grow, which makes it less available than cotton. The second reason is that flax is kind of a more fragile fiber. If you've ever seen a stalk of flax, it's kind of more crumbly, like hay. I guess not crumbly, it cracks. And that's also the reason that linen wrinkles so much and why it needs to be steamed, because that memory kind of lives within the fiber and it creases really easily. So because the flax stalk is fragile and those fibers are fragile, especially before they've been woven into a garment, it needs extra care and time to weave them into a piece of like linen fabric. This increases the labor time and just the skill needed to weave this kind of fabric, increasing the cost. Their blog has a lot more great information on linen generally, like from its sustainability to how you take care of linen. So I really suggest you check that out if you're interested in purchasing linen garments in the future. But now let's travel into the past and unbox the dress that I'm wearing. Hi. Okay, let's unbox this thing. I don't know how to open it. We're gonna just go for it. This is super cute. It comes with an extra button on a little swatch of the fabric the dress is made of, so that's really nice. It's a little bit stiffer than I thought it would be on like first glance. I thought it was going to be a little bit of a softer linen, like the green linen dress that I made. That was a very soft linen. This is a little bit stiffer, but I think that is kind of what makes their dresses do that nice twirly thing. If you've ever seen their pictures, they have very twirly dresses, so I think the stiffness probably helps with that. Really simple packaging, but it's very nicely packaged. The box did really fine in transit, so good on that part. What I didn't mention in the Selkie video or in the strawberry dress video, both of those were packaged pretty poorly. They pretty much just came in plastic mailer bags and were really stuffed full. So those two, while they are more expensive dresses than this, were packaged not very luxury. This is packaged in a way that is like very sturdy. I wouldn't worry about this in transit at all, and it's got like nice tissue paper and comes with a cute postcard and little details like this little garment tag that says I'm going to make everything around me beautiful, that will be my life. Is very cute. The extra little swatch of fabric with the button, also very cute. These are all like little details that I think are really nice. So far they're giving me a really good impression. The only thing that I'm noticing right off the bat that is a little bit not 100% great is these little threads right here. So if you can see, they didn't quite trim off all of the threads, so it's not a huge deal. Obviously it's something that I can do really quickly, but it is something that makes it look a little bit rushed. So that's something that should be done, but it's also a very easy fix. It's not like going to affect literally anything structural or regarding finishing or anything. So I'll just snip those off myself. And that's kind of the only first impression thing I noticed that's not perfectly finished, I guess. I'm gonna go spend some time with this dress, try it on, see how it fits and everything, and take notes on the construction and all of that, and I will see you back once I've done that. Alright, so I'm trying it on and I'm wearing it now. There's my arm in the sleeve, but I didn't realize till I stuck my hand in the pocket, there's a little thing that comes with it. It's so cute. I haven't opened it because I wanted to show you guys, so let's do that real quick. Let's zoom in. Okay. That's cute. I love it when brands include little things in the pockets. Her Own Kind also does that, and like it's got twofold positives. It gives you like a little surprise present, and it also means that the dress has pockets. So, yay. Yay. Okay, now I'm gonna actually take this dress off and stare at its guts for a little bit. This is the Carmen dress in terracotta red, and it's definitely a simpler dress than my previous two dress analysis videos, so this section will be a bit shorter. While it's less complicated in construction though, this dress definitely has the nicest fabric, and the brand is infinitely more transparent in their production practices than Lyrica, Matoshi, or Selkie. First, a couple things to note. The dress has fewer couture finishing techniques than I would personally use to finish my own garment. There is no lining, just one layer of fabric for the entire dress, and every interior seam aside from the shoulder seam is finished with an overlock stitch, which works just fine and won't fray out, but is less clean looking than say a French seam. Selkie also overlocks some of their seams, and they charge at least double what Son de Flor does, and I'm not saying that it's bad, but it definitely is a cost-cutting measure. The other detail that I personally find more unappealing is the machine stitch holding up the top edge of the hem facing. If you've seen my videos before, you've probably watched me cross-stitch quite a few hem facings. I've machine stitched hems before, but I never machine stitch more than a 1/4 inch away from the hem because it's definitely visible from the face of the garment. Personally, I don't like it when that stitching shows, but I don't think anybody else notices unless I point it out. And there are some merits to doing it like this. First, it's much more durable. Son de Flor really emphasizes the longevity of their clothing, and while a cross-stitched on my hand is really cute and nearly invisible, it does have a tendency to catch on things if you're not careful. When I'm wearing my own cross-stitched garments, I'm very aware of how I move and my surroundings, and I can always fix it myself, but for the general consumer, I can see how this would be a pain. Then, of course, doing it by machine rather than hand cuts out a good hour or two of labor. That said, they've done the hem really neatly without any wrinkling or puckering. Since we're already at the skirt and it's simpler than the bodice, let's do that first. This skirt is almost but not quite a full circle skirt made of 6 panels. So there's 3 in the front, 3 in the back. This is actually a better way to make a circle skirt since less of the hem travels through the bias and making the skirt hang more evenly. But obviously it's more time consuming to cut 6 pieces and stitch 6 seams than just cutting 2 big half circles and stitching 2 side seams. This dress has pockets, always exciting, and those panels were probably stitched first to get the more complicated seams out of the way. So 1/2 of each pocket bag, so just like 1 layer of this pocket bag, was stitched to the side front or side back panels at the side seams. They were overlocked after stitching, and these came first. You can tell because this stitching goes over top of this one. Then the entire side seams and pocket bags were stitched then overlocked, leaving a few inches open below the waist for the side zipper. The rest of the skirt seams were stitched then overlocked. I'm not sure if the hem was done before the skirt was attached to the waist or if it was saved for last, but I personally like to do the hem before attaching to the waist because it's less fabric to maneuver. Rather than a bias hem, it looks like they cut a shaped hem. You can tell because sometimes the hem edge is on the straight of grain, but closer to the seam it's more of a bias. This matches the hem on the skirt panels. All of the skirt seams, including the hem facing, have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can kind of see it specifically in the hem facing as it shows through the white part. The hem facing was likely stitched into a donut circle shaped piece and had its top edge pressed down a 1/2 inch before it was stitched to the skirt at all. The hem facing of the skirt gets stitched right sides together 1/2 inch up from the bottom cut edge, so this would be flipped over to the outside, then pressed open, so the white part would be hanging off the end here, and understitched. Understitching is when you stitch through the innermost layer and both seam allowances to force the seam to roll towards the inside of the garment. And you can tell that this was understitched rather than top stitched because there's no stitching line visible on the front side of the garment. So this was understitched like this, holding it open this way with the seam allowances all going towards the white side, so that when it's pressed this way, you can see that there's a little orange band around the white edge, and there's no white showing on the face of the garment, and that's the purpose of the understitching. The hem facing is then flipped up to the inside of the skirt and pressed. Because the top edge of the hem facing is already pressed a 1/2 inch down, you don't have to maneuver the whole thing under the iron, and it just gets stitched down a 1/16 of an inch from the edge. The waist edge of the skirt is gathered very slightly then attached to the bodice, but before it can be attached we have to actually go through the bodice construction. The bodice front is one piece with 2 darts running from waist to bust along the princess line. The back is a bit more complicated with a shearing panel in the center back. There are 2 side back panels with no darts. The shearing panel is just a rectangle of fabric with rows of elastic threads stitched onto the wrong side of the fabric. This is probably where I'll do an alteration to make it fit my waist better. It seems like the elastic thread they used is not strong enough to hold its elasticity in place where a stiffer seam keeps it splayed out. So like at the neckline and at the waist. I'm not so concerned about the neckline because that fits me pretty well, but I want to add a stronger elastic just at the waistline to pull it in a bit. After the shearing panel was complete, the side back panels were stitched on and overlocked. You can tell because the shearing elastic goes straight into that seam allowance. Then the bodice front and bodice back were joined at the shoulder seams with a French seam. Then the whole bodice body was joined at the side seams, leaving most of the left side free for the zipper. Another slightly odd thing is that the bodice right side seam is pressed backwards rather than forwards. Typically you'd press forward like they did on the skirt so that the shadow on the face of the garment is towards the back. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but here the seam is pressed that way so that the shadow lies on this side of the seam. Usually you want all of your shadows facing towards the back of the garment. However, because the right bodice seam is pressed towards the back, the shadow is going to be towards the front, which is kind of opposite of what you'd normally do. They may have done it this way so that the skirt and the bodice seams were facing in different directions, creating less bulk at the waist seam where they join. If they went the same way, there would be 6 layers of seam allowance stacked on top of each other because you have to also account for the waist seam allowance, rather than the 4 layers when they're pressed in opposite directions. So if you look at this seam allowance, there's the 2 layers from this side seam here, and then there's 2 layers from the waist seam allowance. So that makes 4 layers in here. If this were to also go this way, that would be adding another 2 layers of seam allowance, and right here would have 6 layers of seam allowance. If nothing else, I hope that this is giving you a sense of there is no one right way to sew. In this case, there are good arguments for either way. It just depends on what's necessary for your specific garment and your preferences. Unfortunately, there are some wrong ways to sew, but we all do them occasionally, so don't stress out about it. At this point, either the sleeves or the neckline finishing could come next, but I'm always in favor of doing finishing with less fabric swinging around, so we're going to talk about the neckline. The neckline has a 1/4 inch straight of grain binding from the same fabric as the dress. Cutting the binding on the straight of grain makes the neckline very stable and prevents stretching out. The binding was probably cut in 1-inch strips and trimmed after stitching. So the binding gets stitched to the neckline, right sides together at a 1/4 inch, pressed open and understitched. That's the line of stitching closest to the neck edge, and then trimmed down to have 1/2 inch of fabric width left. So it'll be a 1/4 inch on the seam allowance side and then another 1/2 inch on the side that can then get flipped over. A 1/4 inch gets pressed under and then it gets edge stitched. The seam closing the binding is in line with the left shoulder seam. The label tag also gets stitched on with the binding. They also put 2 more lines of elastic thread in the neckline binding, but it doesn't seem to be doing all that much. I think also before the sleeves got put on, the zipper was installed just because it's less fabric everywhere. So that was just done with an invisible zipper foot by lining up the edge of the zipper tape with the edge of the garment and using an invisible zipper foot to just stitch right in that ridge that the zipper makes. And finally, the sleeves. The sleeves are each 1 piece of fabric gathered and bound at the hem with a little placket. Just guessing from how the overlocking tapers off, I think the placket was stitched first by folding under the seam allowance twice and then top stitching. Because there's a placket and the cuff doesn't have to join up to itself, it's easiest to attach it before the sleeve becomes a cylinder. So that's done kind of like a double fold bias tape. Cut a strip of fabric 4 times the width of the cuff by the sleeve hem measurement plus seam allowance and stitch the 2 short sides up. Then stitch the cuff to the sleeves right sides together, fold it over twice, and top stitch. The cuff buttonhole was done by machine and a button was stitched to the other side. The last step is stitching the sleeve into the arm's eye and overlocking, and that's it. Because the sleeve like perfectly fits the arm's eye, there's no gathering or anything, so it's a very simple sleeve to put in. And that's it. Let's go talk about the fit of this dress. So let's talk about fit. I got an extra small, and the extra small is listed as having the measurements for bust of a 33.5 to 34.75 inches, and the waist measurements are listed as 28 to 29.5 inches. With a free hip size, obviously, because there's a big flowy skirt. They have a feature on their website where you can input your own measurements and it'll kind of tell you what the fit will be like on each of their sizes. And for my measurements of a 36.5 inch bust and a 26 inch waist, it told me that it would be slightly tight in the bust and loose in the waist. And that's kind of how it fits. It fits pretty exactly in the bust. I don't know that I would call it slightly tight, but it's definitely loose in the waist. The other fit problem that I'm having is the height of the shoulders. So this is kind of more of a me problem, and it's something that I have to fix in pretty much every commercial pattern that I make for myself. But basically everything would fit better if the shoulders got taken up about this much. So where the point of the darts go, they are a little bit low on my bust when I wear it where the shoulders like actually are, but when I raise it to that height, they sit at the actual apex of my bust, and the waist sits more at my waistline when it's raised, whereas when I lower it, you guys, I don't think you can see it, but the waist is about an inch lower than my natural waist when I just let it hang from the shoulders. Honestly, even without the adjustment, it still fits pretty comfortably, so I'm not gonna change it because this is the only French seam on the whole garment. I would say their sizing is pretty accurate, though it does err on the side of slightly too large, but I don't know, personally I think that's better than too small. But like I said, in their like find your size function, they did say that the bust is going to be a little bit on the tight side and the waist was going to be looser, so I did have kind of an idea of what to expect before it even arrived. So it really just kind of depends on how you want your dresses to fit. I think that I could personally have gone down even 1 size, but like it's probably more comfortable this way anyways. So is Son de Flor worth it? Breaking down the time it takes to make this dress, I would give about 2 hours for cutting, 2 hours for the skirt, maybe 2 to 2.5 hours for the bodice, just because shearing is very tedious, and maybe an hour or so for the sleeves. So that brings us to about 7 or 8 hours. I actually did the research into the cost of living in Lithuania, where these garments are made, and to support like half of a family, like if you have a 2-income family, right, you would need to be making about $10 an hour for an actual living wage. That brings the production cost of this to 80 hours just for labor hours. There's also the cost of the fabric, which has to account for the fair compensation of everybody involved in that process. There's the cost of overhead, which is more expensive if you are giving your workers a good place to work as opposed to like a mass manufacturing garment factory. A higher cost of packaging because they're avoiding plastic in all of their packaging, among some other things. Nice linen from B Black & Sons in LA runs about $25 a yard. So say that Son de Flor is getting all of their linen wholesale. However, they are also having to pay extra for that OEKO-Tex certification. So let's put that at maybe like $20 a yard. These kinds of dresses need probably around 2 to 3 yards depending. So that's an extra $60. So we're at about $140 at this point. So does the rest of the overhead and that kind of stuff account for another $60? Maybe, but maybe it doesn't. However, Son de Flor does need to make a profit. And honestly, I think that brands like this who are willing to put in the effort to make clothing more sustainably and to treat their workers correctly is so important, because it shows other brands that having these standards is profitable, and it's not necessary to do the things like Shein and Forever 21 or whatever else and like ruin the planet, treat your workers terribly in order to make a profit. I'm hoping that by supporting brands like Son de Flor, the entire fashion industry as a whole will be more inclined to move towards these standards. So yes, I would say that if you can afford to shop more sustainably and ethically, it is absolutely worth it. Son de Flor makes beautiful, more wearable everyday garments, and they do so without screwing someone else over in the process. This dress is gonna last me a long time, and even if you're rough on your clothes, I don't anticipate this dress like having any problems with like its integrity. So with all that, I do understand that not everybody can afford to like vote with your money in that kind of way. However, even outside of the brand's values and outside of the quality of the clothing, I think their clothing is also worth it because of that peace of mind you get from knowing that your clothing doesn't have harmful chemicals in it. I was not lying in that bricklinen video when I said that it makes me feel a lot better knowing that on my skin every day I have fabrics that aren't going to be just like poisoningly gradually. Bed sheets and clothing are literally on your skin all day, every day. And if they're covered in harmful chemicals, that's all going directly into your body. So, end verdict is yes, I do think Son de Flor is worth it. I will continue supporting them as a brand, whether purchasing from them or encouraging you guys to purchase from them. I really am excited to see everything that they do in the future as well. They're a really great brand, both with quality and like their values. So 10 out of 10 recommend. Honestly, as far as company values go, I think that I would rate them much higher than both of the other 2 brands I've reviewed so far. So, you know, okay, that's it. I hope to see you guys in the next video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, if you want to know more about this brand, I can try to tell you more, but you know, I kind of info dumped all of it. And if you want to see different brands reviewed, let me know in the comments and I'll add those to my list. And if you want to see other videos from me in the future, please subscribe because it helps out me and my channel, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye!